We've talked an awful lot about the issue of consultation, and it's highly referenced in here, and it's an essential part of our process in our daily life. The board has adopted a set of principles here, and I'm not going to read them all, but they're pretty good principles for us to build a consultation plan out of. And tonight is the first, and our purpose here tonight was to open the process to the members of the public and the communities, to let you know what it is we're going to be doing with your help over the next couple of years. And we're going to be doing it in this way. We've talked about different ideas, and we've made no decisions yet in terms of the actual consultation plan. And I'd certainly be interested in hearing tonight suggestions from you in terms of how we can bring members of the public and groups and agencies into this process. Of course, we're going to have public meetings, we're going to have the elected officials forums, we're going to have the Intergovernmental Advisory Committee, we're going to have information on websites, we'll likely have surveys, there'll be advertising, newspaper notices, all those sort of things. But if people have suggestions in terms of how we can provide information or get reaction from you, please let us know, because we're at the early stage of that as well. So, that's the end of the presentations. And at this point in time, we'll turn it back over to you in terms of if anyone has any questions or comments for us. Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's all interesting. What I find is that within the Valley we've been talking to VHA about where we're going to go with hospitalization. I didn't see much reference in your many lines of input there. But what has happened is that an awful lot of people in the Valley have become quite upset by the fact that VHA doesn't have any meaningful communication with people here. I'm one of a member of a group which went from door to door asking up to 18,000 people in the Valley what they thought about the idea of keeping our existing hospitals, both in Campbell River and here, or going the route which VHA keeps pushing and pushing and pushing and won't turn around about someplace being a new hospital being developed between here and Campbell River. And I don't know if anybody apart from VHA is listening to this, but it really is very important to people of the Valley.
Okay.
What the RGS is essentially a settlement strategy, a land use settlement strategy. The RGS is essentially it's a regional settlement settlement strategy. So I would imagine that as part of the process, you're going to want to, you may want to talk about land use zones or designations. You may want to identify, for example, where you would like to see public institutional use versus where you may not want to see it. But I think I'll stick my neck out and say that I don't know that this process is necessarily going to lead to the answer to that question. You're going to have the Health Authority participating through the Interagency Advisory Committee. So they're going to be aware of the policies that are going to come forward through that discussion. I think it's also going to be important, and again, I'm not dictating the process here, I'm just making suggestions. I think it's also going to be important for some work to be done on issues and trends to identify, for example, in this required content, your projected population, employment. So that's going to be information that's going to be out there, it's going to be in the public. But for example, in one of the growth strategies I worked on, the public sort of identified their wish list for road improvements in unincorporated areas where there's a lot of Forest Service roads linking in communities and rural settlement areas. So Ministry of Transportation and Highways, that's all well and good, but we will only be able to make those improvements based on our available resources. So I'm probably giving you a real mushy answer here, but I think what your task is to work on a settlement strategy, and in terms of how VHA is going to make its capital discussions, staff are going to be plugged into the Interagency Advisory Committee, but I don't know what the interplay is going to be necessarily over the next couple of years between what comes out of this process and that important capital decision. Because it is, obviously, I'm following the media, I know it's a critical decision that both this region, or this, and the new Strathcona region and Campbell River, obviously people are really concerned about. So hopefully that's a mushy answer for you.
Fred, did you want to talk from the perspective of the hospital board?
Well, I might be setting myself up. Well, hopefully VHA will be listening to this process about settlement and should help them with the consultative process. We've put it back in their hands, as you know, to come back with a suggestion to our hospital board as to what their decision is. They've heard our input. So I don't think that has to slow up or change this process. This is about settlement and about land use.
Thanks very much. Whoa, okay, so slow down. First one up was at the back. Yes, sir.
Can I ask everybody to say their name and where they're from?
Sure.
The valley they're from, please.
Could you introduce yourselves and tell us where you're from?
Still do that. I remember short, but I can remember that. My name's Dwayne Bradley, I'm from Merville. And just apropos that last comment about the VHA process, I think it's a critical factor in this whole process. And I say this with the deepest respect for my VHA colleague sitting beside me here. I'm not a VHA person, my friend and colleague, who is a person of the greatest integrity. I wish I could say the same about the whole VHA process. There is an enormous amount of cynicism in this valley about consultation. 4 days notice for a meeting isn't a great start, okay? I really appreciate what you put up there. I really hope that I can believe it in terms of the description of consultation. Our experiences with consultation, you know, as folks at the grassroots, are not good. They are about using up our time to go through a process so that whoever is doing the consultation can tell us that they were right in the beginning anyway. What they wanted to do all along is what we're going to do. That's not a cynical comment. That's a bloody fact. And you really have you're pushing a rock up a hill. I really want to make this thing work. We have to make this thing work. So, one idea. You talked about engaging young people. I suggest you hire an animator, an educator, to engage school children. Absolutely go into the appropriate classes where there's interest amongst the staff and the students, and really get them into this process. We think that kids in grade 5 or 7 or 9 can't get this. We're ignoring, I think, Mr. Bates' comments about the future. Who is this for in 20 years? If they're in grade 5, this is their adult life we're talking about, the length of this plan. So let's get the schools really involved in this process. And let's go down to the grassroots as well. Come into Merville. You know, our experience with OCPs, we bust our butts putting together OCPs. And then Merville's got nothing to complain about. You know, all we're getting is a new city and a hospital landed on top of an OCP we spent all our time doing. Look at Cumberland. Holy hell, what's happened to that, happening to the OCP in that community? It's a meaningless process. And the first guy that comes along with money, then the OCP is out the window because he's got money, the rights to purchase property, and do as he sees fit within consultation with the local government. Our experience isn't great in this consultation process. So we need to be shown that it's going to be real, and we need to know that what we say, the folks that are engaged in this process, really has an impact. So I don't want to sound like a bitter old man, but I'm getting cynical.
Thank you for the thoughts. We've already...
We've already had contact with the school district with review to their role and participation in this. We'll put the idea of getting some engagement of classes right on the list. Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Hi there, my name is Grant Gordon. I live in Area C. And I think that this process, this regional growth strategy, seemed to me, in my opinion anyways, that it was offered to rural people as a saw from the provincial government when we complained about the creation of the new regional district board, and which I feel was struck to assist developers to get around the rural directors and how those rural directors were obstructing development in COMOX Valley. But that's the opinion that seems to be out there, and that new regional district had to be created for it. And so I think that this process, and the way it was outlined tonight, is stacked against the rural participants. There's 3 municipalities and 1 regional district on this committee, on this thing, and now those elected body, those regional district people are our only representatives. I have 1 representative that's the Area C director. And the RD board is voting in this structure along with the 3 municipalities. It means that the municipalities get to vote twice because, of course, the regional district voting structure is now stacked in the favor of the municipalities. So I'm very suspicious of the way this whole thing is happening, and I think it's a cut and log situation. It's a talk and log situation.
Okay, thank you for your thoughts. I don't know who was next. Ma'am?
Susan Hargreaves from Union Bay. You talked in the intergovernmental advisory committees that all areas, elected areas, would be represented. Areas with their elected bodies would be represented. And I was wondering, for the improvement districts, will some of their trustees and their elected bodies be at that table as well?
Good question. We'll make sure that I haven't given that one much thought yet, but we'll put it on the list. We're at early days in this. I keep, saying that we don't have all the answers, and that's part of the reason why we're here tonight, is to hear some of these things. So thank you. Yes, sir. Name?
John Brett, Murrayville. Lived there for 38 years. I speak with the voice of experience, having lived in Murrayville for 38 years. And I also have engineering qualification. Now, with this experience of mine, I think of, regretfully, a lot of pie in the sky. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. If we marry in haste, we repent at leisure. And don't put the fox in charge of the chickens. Sorry to have to say it. We've heard a word of this hospital business. We've heard about greenhouse gases and all that stuff previously.
Can you speak up, please?
But what I do say is that as far as the hospital goes, we have to consider logistics, demographics, and viability. Now, as far as the logistics go, and again with this greenhouse gas business in mind, my rough calculation, when I look at the sea of cars outside our hospital in Courtenay and also in Campbell River, that to get those people, service people, professional people, and all the others concerned in hospital business, to get them to and fro to that nice new hospital is going to take from 4,000 to 6,000 litres of gasoline a day. Carbon footprint, greenhouse gases, and all that stuff. I've also said, or told my wife, with regard to the accessibility of the hospital, we have to think of viability, but I've told my wife, living as I do out at Murrayville, that if I get a heart attack, don't try to get me to hospital, call the undertaker.
Okay. Thank you very much. Before we go on too much further, I just want to remind everyone that while the hospital is a passionate issue, and thank goodness that people feel passionate about it, that's a different process. And we really like to see if we could ask you to focus on the regional growth strategy. And I'm sure that VHA will be offering other opportunities for more public comment on that other issue.
Can I just make a comment too?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
This to me is it happens in every region. In SLRD, there are hot button issues, and you have to
Use the
Speak
mic,
to the
please.
Oh, sorry.
in every region there are hot button issues. In SLRD it was independent power projects, and I think part of my role obviously is not to tell you folks necessarily what to talk about or what to focus on, but just to be clear about what an RGS is and what it can do for you and what it can't necessarily. So I think, yeah, so I'll just leave it at that. There are going to be, you know, obviously some hot button issues. I think that's normal.
Thanks, Brett. Yes, sir.
Brian Conroy, I live in COMOX. I just want you to understand that the regional board has told you that health is a big issue to be addressed in this strategy. And if you think that the COMOX Regional District is going to work with the COMOX Strathcona Regional District to resolve the health issue, you're wrong. It's going to be done here. We'll come up with a recommendation for here, and it's not going to be a regional beyond our regional district. So get it through your heads that we're going to address this in this strategy.
Okay, thank you. All right. Yes, sir. Name?
Brian Charlton Courtney. And well, actually I want to go back to Wayne's comment because I didn't feel it was really answered. And that was the cynicism about the process of public consultation, because there has been, as they cited, VHA, Cumberland, and other places, and they feel that, so you know, if we're sincere about the consultation, has the board or anybody on the board talked about how we get that to overcome that cynicism and get people engaged?
Okay. The first step in the process is tonight. And respect the fact that there was not an awful lot of notice, but we felt it was important that we get out to the public with at least an explanation of what it is we're going to be walking down the path before summer. You know, so we know that there's a couple of months now when we're not going to be conducting an awful lot of dialogue back and forth. But that's the purpose of tonight. This is the very first step out the door in terms of consultation and communicating with the public. And my first question to you was, how can we do a better job of it? And we're getting some suggestions and answers. And all I can do is I can, as the professional in charge of this project, I can endeavor to do my best to try and meet those needs. In the end, the decisions will ultimately be reached by the politicians at the local level and the regional level, and they're the ones who are the decision makers. But we're going to work hard. That's, I can rest assured. So suggestions are wonderfully welcome. Yes, ma'am.
Anna Cathro. There was passing reference made to conservation. Now, are you aware of Nature Without Borders, which was produced by the Comox Valley Land Trust, and are you going to use it?
Yes, and I apologize for that oversight. It's one of the fundamental documents that we brought in to the regional districts. And if nobody is aware of, not enough people are aware of it, it's a huge amount of information and data that has been collected by effectively a volunteer group. And we certainly do look to that as a source of information, and we anticipate that there'll be ongoing dialogue with that community as we go over the path.
So for anybody who's interested, the website is www.cvlandtrust.org.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir. Nope.
My name's Alan Devon. I'm just recently moved to Courtney. I agree with some of the things I've heard in the forums that you mentioned there, sort of websites and surveys. They're the types of forums that government gives to the public in a sense that you've already made your policy up and then we just read about it later. But it seems like you're talking to dozens, if not hundreds of people through the intergovernment committees and those types of things, First Nations. But there's only about 110 people here tonight, maybe, and I would think another 100 interested in input. So would you consider something like setting up an email address or something like that where people could send in their ideas and you could have some sort of a public sort of scrutiny of those ideas and perhaps bring people from the public to present ideas to these panels that you plan to talk to. That way, and also if people know what's being posted, they know that you're not just picking members of the public that happen to be aligned with your policy. It's just an idea, and I think it would be a good way of bringing these people into a panel.
We're looking at a couple, and I think the most recent one I've seen is in Cowichan Valley with an update of some of their work in terms of the regional planning work they're doing, it's a review of their official community plan, and it's got an interactive two-way email system set up. And we've talked with our people about having that provision as well, so certainly online for that. Okay.
Just wanted to notice the fellow in the
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Mayor Bates. I have been waving my arm.
Yeah,
Because a lot of people are waving their
Yeah, a
arms.
lot of people are waving their
arms. My name's Niels von Mayenfeld, and I live in Royston. And I came out tonight because I'm in one of those little spots, a little pocket of existing urban development. And there are a lot of those in the valley. And I'm interested in the idea of renewal in existing areas that may be a little bit lacking in amenities or need some improvements, some beautification. I'm in a subdivision and I can't get in and out of it except by car. The highway is below where I live. If I want to go into town on my bike, I have to brave the highway, which is a pretty forbidding business, especially when it's wet. And I noticed quite a few people lately have been attempting to ride their bikes along the old highway, and you know, you do that once or twice and you think maybe I won't do that again. So in the interest of growth, you know, if you get really focused on growth, please also remember that there's a lot of existing urban fabric which you know, has developed slowly over the years. Some of it is in decline, some of it is, there are areas which are declining as well as areas that are, you know, inviting a lot of growth. And I would invite you to look at the areas that are, if you like, undersupplied with parks, with places for people to meet, with safe routes where you can walk the dog without fear of being run over, and things like that. I think some of the benefits of growth is going to happen, I think. I'm not going to stop it. But let's let the benefits accrue to the whole region, not just to the areas where it's happening, and the brand new neighborhoods perhaps. Because we have a lot of old housing stock around here, and we have a lot of places that frankly could be spiffed up a little bit. You know, I'd like to see a great bicycle network here for scooters and bikes. And I'd like to see some wires go underground in places where they really are an eyesore. We have this beautiful scenery. What about some attention paid to maybe through development cost charges or leveling out the whole playing field? Some of the money that's gathered through development goes to, you know, to work at these different areas in the district so that we, you know, we all benefit.
Thank you for your thoughts.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Bob Mortimer, Courtney. I'd like to first of all congratulate you, notwithstanding the short notice about this meeting, on starting this process, and wishing you as a project manager the best of luck to make your target in 2010.
He needs it.
I would like to ask you a couple of questions and make one further point. The Intergovernmental Advisory Committee you described, as you described, has a cast of thousands or hundreds, you said, I believe. Do you actually envisage this committee sitting down as one committee at several times to work together? I mean, the numbers seem just to be unmanageable at first glance.
Okay, probably Brent, who's gone through this exact process elsewhere, is the best person. You know, you're right. It probably won't meet physically on a regular basis, but it's a process to share information back and forth, and the network and finding the right person in the hundreds of thousands of people in government that you would need to talk to. So that's the benefits of it as well.
That's one of the big responsibilities of our ministry and myself I have.
I could understand
so,
you need to consult with them all, yes.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's partly to get them to bring value to the table, but also to make them aware of the local government role. So for example, if the growth strategy results in, you know, general settlement plan, it's then reflected in OCPs. I think it's important, for example, that the Integrated Land Management Bureau understands the process, and then if there's crown parcels out there, for example, that they know that that has to fit into a local government framework. So that, for example, is one agency that's going to be critical. I think it's important to make sure all the agencies that have sort of a land or resource component are aware of the process. I'm not sure how many meetings it'll take to get the interests out and get to the, you know, the key points on the table. I think there will be some agencies that will want to be actively engaged and will participate all the way through. Others, you know, will only take an interest to the degree to which they see that their mandate's affected. I think the process is in other regions has been manageable. And again, it's, you know, that's just one input. The consultation plan that Rob's working on also has to provide for public input. And so, for example, in the SLRD, I think there was a point made earlier about, yeah, I recognize that there's tens of thousands of people who live in this region. There's only a few people here. So in SLRD, we had one workshop where there was 500-600 people showed up. They also had regional meetings throughout the region. I think one thing I will say about this process is you're already having a meeting to talk about the consultation plan, in which the board has to adopt. So they're already getting some advance input. The other thing I'll say is that it's a relatively, in terms of the settled areas, it's relatively small. It's not like having to bring folks together from Whistler all the way to Lillooet for a discussion. So I think there are some ways to do things here to help move the process forward.
And that raises the second point. I had a little bit of concern when you talk about the adjacent regional districts having input. How many cooks are there going to be stirring that broth? Given the fact that we just split this regional district.
Well, this is one of the things that's mandated by the legislation, so we'll do it. One of the groups has already set a representative. And you also have to appreciate, though, that we're in the same position. The regional district of Nanaimo is going through a review of its growth strategy right now, and we're going to be asked to comment upon it and participate in it as well from COMOX Valley. So this is a multi-jurisdictional sort of mandate, and we'll work through. Their interests are pretty small compared to the interests of the people that live here.
And just to follow up the suggestion that was made about an interactive email,
yes.
I would also like to suggest that you use, for those of us who are not all that adept at the email, use a flyer with information as you approach various stages that has enough significant information in it that people can in fact respond to it. And I'm thinking of a 4-page newsprint thing like was there when the infamous 99 amalgamation issue came along. There was newspaper that went out and put out an awful lot of information about that.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. You've been quite patient.
Thank you very much. My name is Wendy Prothero, and I live in COMOX. And just a couple of things that occurred to me when you were talking specifically about greenhouse gases. I was just doing a little calculation there, and we signed on to that process. And as far as I know, going to the Canadian Federation of Municipalities website, nothing has transpired yet. And I understand that carries on to the new regional district that's been formed now. So I think that's something that I'm hoping that the regional district will start making some strides. There were 5 milestones there that were supposed to, with greenhouse gas inventories being the first one. I don't know if our regional district has actually started that process, but you signed on to it in 2006. And I'm not sure what's happened there. The other thing I wanted to point out, you mentioned there's going to be a political elected officials forum. I am quite interested in transportation. I cycle a lot, and I wish we'd had more public transit and more cycle paths. That'd be something I would sure encourage you to look at. But I go to the cycling task force meetings here that is part of all of our all of the municipalities take part in that, all of the some elected officials, and it's open to the public. And I'm just wondering if the political elected officials forum that you're going to have will be open to the public. We don't have the opportunity to have input, but we're there to listen, to hear what our public officials say at the cycling task force meetings. So I'm wondering, that would be a suggestion for you, to open that to the public.
Okay, thank you. Yes?
Will you be opening it to the public?
Good suggestion. We'll work with politicians and make decisions.
We haven't decided that. I'm just curious, at the beginning you said the Holland Bar study was going to be a basis, one of the foundations of the whole process. Yeah. But in that, they talk about 2 different types of development. They talk about having containment boundaries that are a circle, like we're supposed to have in Cumberland, or they have ones where it ends up going out like starfishes. So if it's going to be a foundation, has it been decided which way we're going to go? I also agree with the first gentleman speaker, I think his name was Dwayne. From my own experience in Cumberland, we have not had very good use of our time in talking to our politicians. They do seem to sell out, and that's one of the things it says in the Holland Bar that it takes strong political leadership to actually maintain a urban containment boundary or a residential containment boundary. And I would just like to know which way are they actually going, because that came out quite a long time ago, considering when the meeting is being held tonight, on whether, because that one talks mainly about dealing with developers, about where we should develop, not about what we should say. And I think it's a whole different focus of life. If you look at the valley saying, what do we want to keep, not the question of what do we want to develop. And I think it's a different way of looking at it. And what I'm hearing here is where do we want to develop, not what do we want to keep. And I would disagree with, at the Village of Cumberland, when they had their council meeting, they received the Holland Bar report, but they did not uphold it. They did not say they were going to follow it. So what happens to all of those developments that are quickly scurrying along to first and second reading that would completely change the concept of what the development is in the valley if all of a sudden Cumberland becomes larger than the size of the town of COMOX long before this is even implemented?
Okay. I'll try and just give some information in terms of the last point you raised, Kate. It's a very good one. And it's something that every regional district that's engaged in the process is experiencing. We're struggling with what to do in the interim as well. We don't want to force a whole bunch of applications coming in under a deadline. So discussions are going on right now in terms of how we can build some of these pillars of sustainability and those principles into decision making, no matter at what level in the process an application is at. So something might have gone through first reading of a bylaw, can we still build this in? Can we still review? Can we still consider these issues? So we're working that through our system right now because we want to try and make this real.
Except what's happening in Cumberland is all of a sudden we have had 3 new bylaws that have got first and second reading in the last month. And all I can see is that the village is trying to get it through before this is even there so that they don't have to account to anyone else in the regional district. And meanwhile, I don't even see a definition of what urban sprawl is. I mean, what I'm seeing up in Cumberland of what they're proposing is urban sprawl.
Okay. I'm not so sure I'm capable of responding to all of those questions here tonight, but certainly
well, I don't think people in government actually respond to the people at all.
Okay,
have
Kate.
to look at it
Thanks
like
very much.
we're going to elect in November, so that
Thanks.
they have a say in what's in the plan.
The ultimate of that is in November. Yes, sir.
Okay, firstly,
Name?
Jim Gillis, Area B. Firstly, I think this regional growth strategy is probably the most important thing that's going to happen in the valley in the next 50 or so years, providing you get the necessary input from the people. And a couple of suggestions. I think I'd like to see some sort of a process or a plan worked out for public input, and that you look at either publishing possible meetings where the public can be involved and give input. As has already been pointed out, we only had 6 or so days for this meeting. I'm sure if it was 2 weeks and there was a big advertisement, you'd have seen this hall filled. So my suggestion would be to do that and provide the long-term schedule of public meetings, provide meeting venues in the outlying areas as well. Because this regional growth strategy could be and should be what shapes the COMOX Valley for the next 100 years. And so I think it is extremely important. Who knows? We might even get one valley, one government somewhere down the line to run the whole operation. We don't know.
Good suggestion. And there actually will be a published plan of how the consultation is going to be done. But it's too early, at least in my professional judgment, it's too early to put that plan together until we have a chance to have this kind of conversation. You know, the idea of meetings in remote locations has come forward, and appreciate that. You know, there's meetings on a geographic basis, there's meeting on themes and topics, there's discussions, panels, there's all sorts of different ways we can go about doing this. So we haven't put the pen to paper yet until we have had a bit of a conversation here. Yes, ma'am.
Well, my name's Sheila McDonald.
Thank you.
Of course, remember that part. I'm prepared to be quite enthusiastic about this process. I think it could be quite important. And I do have, you know, I've read of some very good processes in areas that have had huge buy-in. There was a visioning process in Flagstaff, Arizona that I read about that. It resulted If you start with neighborhood meetings where they discuss, I think the place is to start with values and vision. And that'll help people not get necessarily so stuck in their position and their particular interests, but start to talk about what is important to keep and what we love about this area, and how to make that village feel or the neighborhood feels better. And I think sometimes if you show people pictures of a beautiful street and the box development, and you just show a series of pictures and people will pick what resonates for them, and then you talk about the values that go behind what they're looking at, and you can then start letting the planners and developers understand what people are looking for and creating the communities that they want to live in. And you can have a lot more density that doesn't look dense. So I'm prepared to be quite enthusiastic. And I really recommend that you start at that place with some really big, big community forums about values and vision, little neighborhood groups, little meetings, coffee table approach. So on some specific points about your plan, I noticed you have your housing and those mandated issues, and you've added public health and safety. I think you should add education, because one of the issues that we've been dealing with here is school district and closures, and I think that if education, the future of education, and its links to where appropriate family housing, and to our huge demographic issue in this valley of are we going to have any young families in the future, all of those issues tie together. We might end up not having beautiful brand new schools in completely inappropriate places and all the stress. So you might add that one onto the list. So my cynicism about the consultation process doesn't come so much from the hospital, because actually a hospital in COMOX is not convenient for me. Or even about Cumberland, it comes from the school district's planning thing. So there's a lesson in this recent school district consultation, which is don't have meetings that bring technical stuff and ask people to make a choice. People get really frustrated when they're asked to pick their favorite and they have no background information, and it's just a bunch of spreadsheets. It was really infuriating to a lot of people to be asked to make an uninformed choice. So you need to inform before people give their input.
Great.
So that's a pretty critical one. And the other comment is to all of the politicians here in the room. I think that you would make a huge step in making a statement about your commitment to the credibility of this process if you would put a moratorium on further developments until this plan is in place. I think it would benefit our valley, and I think it would actually benefit the developers, because I think this process could identify there are huge opportunities for infill. Really great development is waiting to happen right, downtown here. Less cost to the developer, great opportunities. I mean, and we would be saving what we love most about it. So from the point of view of responding to the public who elected you and letting them know that you really are going to put, your actions behind the sustainability checklist talk, that would be the way to do it. So to the politicians, that's the #1 way to get positive buy-in into this process, is make it a real process from now.
Okay, thank you. Patience as we get through. We're still working on people who haven't spoken yet, so appreciate it. Go ahead, ma'am. You've been great.
I'm Steph Nathan, and I don't know if you know that 10% of the world's populations of trumpeter swans overwinter here. And we do need to protect the areas in which they spend their time, both the areas they roost at night as well as where they feed during the day. And we have a lot of protected bird areas. We have some very special wildlife areas here, and they all need to be in this plan, and they need to be very much out in front, because they bring our tourists, they bring dollars, and they're also beautiful to look at. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yeah, my name's John Milne. I live in Merville, and one thing issue that concerns me is the
gobbling up of the rural areas by the cities. And I came here tonight thinking that part of this process was urban containment boundaries, and I believe there was a statement that said it may or may not be. So I have a question: is it going to be part of this process or not? I was kind of hoping to see something containing sprawl come out of this.
Okay, so it's still too early for us to pick the policy direction to go in. And it's premature because we've not had any conversation, dialogue. We would be making an uninformed decision.
So it's not necessarily part of this process?
No. It will be part of the process. Whether or not there's tight, firm urban containment boundaries or not is a significant policy decision. As Brenda's mentioned, there's been some good experiences in some locations with both options handled properly. So we haven't prejudged either of those two yet. But certainly the pillars of sustainability talk about densification and compact urban form as opposed to a continuation of sprawl. That principle, I think, is fundamental to the process that we're engaged in.
Doesn't one follow from the other?
Well, it's how you get it. It's how you get it. We want to make sure that we don't create the problems that are being created in other jurisdictions by following one path if there's a better way for us to go. So it's just, we've been at this for months, so okay. Give us a bit of time and we'll get there. Brett, did you want to talk about boundaries?
Well, I think the experience in the CRD has been the urban containment boundary has caused a lot of tension, and it's around, they've been fighting about a line on the map, and so I don't know whether that's good or bad. On the positive, when you look at the CRD's indicators, majority of growth has occurred since the urban containment boundary has been in place has been inside the boundary. But then on the other hand, you've got to think about the relationships between local governments, and they are always there. I heard one of the mayors say, the mayor from Saanich, say when the issue came to the board, the growth strategy is something that we should feel good about and happy about, and yet whenever we're talking about it, we're arguing because of this line on the map. So a lot of jurisdictions, Portland, have used urban containment boundaries. It's just a matter, I think the focus is on what outcomes do you want to achieve and what's going to be the best policy instrument to get that outcome. So there's experience out there to look at. I think also take a look at the SLRD's approach, not necessarily lines on a map, but making it clear where the urban areas are going to be versus resource areas versus rural settlement versus in that region, one of the dynamics is fully contained resorts. There's potential for resorts in rural areas. So there's different approaches. I think keep your focus on the outcomes.
Yes, sir.
Sure, from Courtney. Just wondering, Rob, I appreciate that the public consultation process is mandated through the Act. Just looking at the time frame to adopt or complete the RGS, you're looking at the end of next year. That's 18 months from now. You're shooting for an earlier date, say 14 months. When's the public consultation plan going to be coming before the board so that we can see what's going to be, the environmental groups are going to be consulted, the residents are going to be consulted, et cetera. Is there a target date for the completion of that consultation plan?
Okay. You stole a year from me, Jared. It's the end of 2010 is the drop dead time. Whew. I thought we were in real trouble.
That's a year and a half, isn't it?
The end of 2010.
Yeah.
We're in the middle of 208.
2.5.
Year and a half from now.
You failed that. Kelly, I hope you're doing the books in that business. And the answer to the question in terms of when is the consultation plan going to be in front of the board, probably we don't expect to do an awful lot of business of actually starting the planning process over the course of the summer. We're ramping for a September target to have terms of reference, consultation plan, and a whole number of products done by then. So I would say that you'll be looking at this in September. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I think it would demonstrate greater respect for public input if the microphone for public input was at the front of the room and if people were encouraged to use it so that everyone could be heard.
Okay, thank you. I'm trying to get people who haven't spoken yet, so yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Jennifer Cutfield, Courtney, I'll try and speak louder. I had two questions, one for you, Rob, and one for Brent, if I can. The first is, it seems kind of curious that you're breaking out a sustainability strategy and a regional growth strategy, with your foundation documents for the regional growth strategy being based on sustainability documents and the Fantastic Natures Without Borders documents. I just wondered if you could define by sustainability, do you just mean environmental, or what was your kind of thought process behind that? And my second question for Brent, I don't know, do you want me to let you answer first and then Brent, or should I go for the gusto? Okay, the second one had to deal more with, I guess, other precedents. You said every area has a different approach to their RGS based on different value sets and different contexts. With the new bills, Bill 27 coming online and other bills out there addressing more of a focus on carbon footprint, greenhouse gas footprint, are there other precedents, possibly even outside Canada and North America, possibly in Europe, who have had carbon trading schemes for a long time that you're looking at to sort of shape the monitoring and frameworks for assessing progress and how we meet these new targets that no one really in Canada has had to do with yet?
Okay, two good questions. With regards to the first, when I mentioned that the sustainability strategy phases 2 and phase 3 are about to, phase 2 is about to start, and that work will proceed with a lot of public consultation, and the growth strategy one is going to be tagging along right beside it. So I expect that there's going to be lots of information back and forth. The growth strategy deals, as Brent has said, with settlement patterns and land use, whereas the sustainability principles deal with a bit larger human context within the natural environment. So there are some things that cross over, and there are some things that are distinct in each. But the goal is to bring them together as much as possible, and to base decisions perhaps in the interim on some of those principles as well, even before the growth strategy is in place. So those are some of the things that we're going to be working on.
The direction in the legislation is there now. One of the jobs for our ministry is to figure out how to provide resources to local governments so they can use it. And part of, I think, the greenhouse gas emission issue is being able to look at your local drivers to establish your baseline. So there's organizations out there like the Community Energy Association that are providing guidebooks on that kind of thing, so local governments can look at, I guess, first their operations, right? So they're all the buildings, their fleets, their behaviors. I don't know, folks, if you ever get a chance, I know it's a completely different context, but when you go to Whistler, you may find, for example, that in their municipal buildings, they've got not just low flush toilets, but how do I say this politely? A P button and an other button, for example.
Dual flush.
Dual flushing there, thank you very much. So, that's obviously the first part. The second part then is looking at the influences that you have in the community. Obviously, your settlement patterns are going to have a huge impact. Climate change, there's kind of two sides to it. There's I think the mitigation issue, which is looking at what can we do to contribute to the resolution of the issue. The other side of it, I think the communities have to think about is adaptation. So when you look at London, England, for example, they're having huge issues around lack of water supply in the summer. Issues around it's getting so warm there that, in the summertime, there's not enough energy. Everybody just can't turn their air conditioners on. So they're having to look at strategies around making sure there's lots of outside shaded public space, that restaurants have outside seating, just because people have to get outside to cool down. So there are some leading examples. You have to kind of differentiate between the mitigation side and the adaptation side. Here on the coast, as I sort of tried to point out in that slide, because we're near the ocean, we're not going to have to deal necessarily with the kind of adaptation that they're having to deal with in the interior, with the mountain pine beetle. When I watched the news last summer in Kamloops, I was astounded to see in areas that my own neighborhood, all the trees being cut down because they're dry and they're now concerned about wildfires. So those are the two things I think you have to look at. If you probably Google Community Energy Association, there's going to be lots of resources there, and we're obviously going to have to be working with UBCM and individual local governments to provide the advice so that they can make the right decisions to embed the right targets and policies in their OCPs and in their RGSs. Should also mention too that, and I shouldn't be taking up your time because the questions are more important than the answers in some respect, but when we talk about reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 33%, local government and land use planning is only one sector. There are other sectors I could have introduced a slide that showed transportation and industry and all those other things. So it's not like local government and land use planning is going to resolve it all. This is only one slice of the pie. So there's other sectors that have their homework to do.
Thank you, Brent. Okay, again, could I just ask people who haven't spoken yet to give you a chance? Yes, sir.
This is an interesting heritage. Paul Wilson, Cumberland. Interesting heritage we have on the east coast of Vancouver Island is predominance of privately held lands. It's different than anywhere else in the province. I see like Timber West and some of the other forest companies are a major mode of changing into completely selling off all their lands. I mean, is the government going to put in legislation that's going to give teeth so that when we say on a regional planning here that we'd like to see these areas kept for park, recreation, and such, that we're going to actually be able to do that and not have these guys go off and sell off these large tracts of land without any, or clear them completely or whatnot. Like, they need to be held to the same level of, only so much percentage, of harvesting per year, things like that, that we're losing our recreation opportunities, our transportation opportunities, wildlife and all those other things. So is the government going to give us those teeth at the regional level to be able to be backing us up if we make these plans as we go forward?
Well, I'll be honest, that's a bit of a political question I can't directly deal with, but I mean, there is a reality out there. Vancouver Island has a lot less ground land as a percentage, a lot of private land. Folks may have seen the media and seen that there was an issue in the south end of the island. All I can say, I guess, in terms of contributing to the overall public debate is there's going to be an Auditor General's report out on the whole issue. And so from my perspective at a staff level, I'll be interested to see what that report says and the degree to which that triggers more debate on the issue. But it's a political issue, so I don't know what more I can say.
Well, to a certain extent, there is some teeth now in local legislation through official community plans and zoning bylaws. That traditionally on Vancouver Island, they were sort of silent on some of those forest lands. They weren't really dealt with because they were just always going to be forest lands. So, everybody is now working really hard to catch up to the new reality. But there is some local teeth in place now, and more will likely be coming to deal with those things. And Timber West has to come to the, to the communities for approvals as well.
But I should also say, that is also their agency advisory committee issue. So that's why I'm going to want an appropriate representative from the Ministry of Forests, an appropriate representative from Ministry of Agriculture and Lands, an appropriate representative from the Integrated Land Management Bureau. So, they can hear the local issues and talk about how to help address those issues.
Okay, thank you. So somebody over, yes ma'am.
My name is Maya Bostock. I live in Area C. I have a few quick questions. One is, if you've been working on this process since March, I'd like to know specifically why there was only 4 days notification for this meeting. I'd like to know that because I know lots of people who would like to be here, and I don't think they had any chance at all. And it should be even longer consideration than because it's summer. Another question is, when you said that it's only 2 years since the process, you want the process to be kind of completed, and that you stated that was light speed compared to some other communities, I'm curious to know why that is the case, that we are expected to do this in light speed.
Well, one of the things that I've experienced is a lot of time and effort being put into the plan and less on implementation. And our experience at a staff level has been some of these processes maybe could have been a little bit done a bit quicker to get on with the implementation. So I think in this valley, the region is large, but the focus of the issue is really on the settled areas. So, compared to the SLRD that took, I think, around 4 years, you've got a region where the communities are fairly close together. I think there should be a way to do it within the time frame. It's been mandated by Cabinet. I don't want to say that time frame is going to change, but just start working away and see where you get, and we'll just take stock of where we're at a year from now. And then, and further to that, see how the process is going. But I know at the staff level, it's concerning, like in the Capital Regional District, they took about 8 years, and by the time they were done, everybody was exhausted. And so you're going to have to put as much effort into implementation, I think, and monitoring, and going through iterations of the RGS as you're going to have to take into getting it done the first time. I think the other quote I'd throw out there from one of my mentors is don't focus on trying to make it perfect the first time. Try to get something that's reasonable and good. So don't sacrifice what might be reasonable and good for trying to reach that perfection. Because the whole intention is to set it for 20 years, monitor it, and then look at it and update it. It should be a living, breathing document.
And I'll take full responsibility for the short notice. I thought it was more important that we had a meeting to get information out through the press to the public at least before the summer started than it was to wait until September. So, you know, that's my fault. I'm sorry. And what I can do is, well,
Just a couple more questions. Thank you both.
I can tell you that there will be more than a week's notice for the future meetings.
Just to respond, when one of the regions I work with, they initiated, and they did a lot of work to design things, and then they didn't start their consultation until almost 7 or 8 months later, because they were trying to just get things organized. So I think, and I did talk to Rob about this, and he wanted to make sure that folks understood where we're at in the process in terms of the status, but this is just the beginning. So, hope that helps.
So thank you. I've just got two more questions. One, when you said that you're hoping by 2010 to have the greenhouse gases 33% below the 2007 level, where are they now, 2 years before that deadline?
I don't have that data handy in terms of how much output we have provincially right now. But we can discuss that more at a future meeting.
Also, just the last one is just concerning my own level of cynicism. We did go through a process, like Sheila was suggesting, where you started at a neighborhood level and we talked through our envisioning process when we did the OCPs. And it seems to me that they're apparently obsolete now. I'd like someone to address that, why that is, and why we have to do it again so soon.
Okay. Okay, so we need to take away some confusion. If you think that the regional growth strategy is going to make local OCPs obsolete, that's not the case. This one is for the region, and then in future, all planning activities have to be brought into compliance with that. So it doesn't make existing OCPs obsolete, but in the future they work towards fuller compliance if there is any discrepancy. Does that make sense?
I guess so.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. No, excuse me, Kate, there's people who haven't spoken yet, please. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Wendy Catilla, I live in Area A.
Thank you.
I guess, first of all, I want to echo what a few other people have said about concerns about being involved in these processes. I was involved in the Cumberland OCP. I'm not a resident of Cumberland, but I was invited in to be involved in the environmental portion of the OCP. And from my experience, OCPs can be changed, and they seem to be changed all the time. So I'm really concerned about, good use of my time. I'm also a little older than when I did that before, so I, like to have a good value of my time. And I heard that, I thought that you said, Brent, that one other area that had the RGS was already looking at an amendment, and that really concerns me. If people are going to work on these things, then they can be amended, and they're no different than OCPs. This fellow here mentioned about looking at already established subdivisions and making them, bike friendly. Places you can walk your dog. I don't really think that with the development that's going up the road from my place, Trilogy, that could be a very nice place to walk my dog. So I don't feel like we're paying attention to making places really, really livable and urban forest. I don't know. I don't understand what an urban forest is. I really have a lot of concerns about this process, and like I said, I'm not sure it's a good use of my time.
Get it loud and clear. Yeah. So is there anybody else who hasn't spoken for the first time? Yeah, so we still have some. Yes, sir.
Question about, just a minute, I really wanted Brent to, About this one being amended already?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they're 20-year plans, but the idea is that they should be reviewed. And if folks locally, regionally think they need to be updated and amended, then the legislation provides for that.
What's the difference between that and the OCPs that are gutted all the time?
All I can say is I think the premise here is that population is growing. And so you've got to do the best you can, I think, to try to create the kind of urban form that you want to accommodate that population. But things do change over time. If you're really interested in this, there's it's an interesting dispute right now in the Capital Regional District with respect to the change of the urban containment boundary to enable the Phase 2 of the Bear Mountain development. And the Regional District, at the District of Highlands' request, is trying to amend the RGS, and 9 of the 13 municipalities have said no. They believe urban sprawl is an important principle, and that issue is under dispute resolution right now. So I guess what, I don't know if we can talk afterwards if you want, but areas change, things change. I mean, I don't think plans can stay the same forever, but I do think that it's a local decision. You establish your plan, you use indicators to determine if you're making the right progress or not, and you make the amendments as you see fit or not.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir.
Dwayne Boyce from COMOX. I'm a member of the steering committee for the conservation strategy. That I want to congratulate the local councils for having the support in approving the recommendations that we made through that. I also want to say that as much as I'm respectful of a public consultation process, I also want to express the need for the use of genius on the part of elected officials. I think about the Greenbelt in Toronto that did not have any public consultation. It made Toronto a far more livable city for many, many generations after that. I think about the council in Winnipeg that voted to put in Assiniboine Park. Again, the public voted a lot of those people out of office afterwards, unfortunately, but now Winnipeg is a more livable city because of that park. And I think about Vancouver Stanley Park. Again, people having the foresight to do the right thing. And as a part, as a part of the genius about how communities come and work and live together. Now, I think we have 3 things that are facing us here in the valley, here on the island. One is, of course, global climate change. The second one, I think, is the massive loss of biodiversity. I don't know why the politicians aren't talking about this. The environmental community is and is aware of it, and it's massive, and it's fast, and it relates to global warming. And I think we have a very precious responsibility here in this valley because of the richness of the biodiversity to protect it. So I'd like to see that very much part of the genius of the decision-making that I would ask people to engage in. And the third one, I think, is also a new thing for us, is the massive migration of older Canadians to Vancouver Island for retirement. And so that's put a lot of development pressure on us. So we have 3 things that we largely have not faced before. I think we need to be thinking in terms of radical solutions. I'd like to see a no-growth option, a slow growth option, a smart growth option, and hell, let's go for it option. So we can judge what are the pros and cons of all of those approaches. What wins? Does the environment win? Does our way of life win? What do we give up? And I think those are the kinds of decision-making that really inform and enlighten and change people's minds, because we're all in the process of changing our own minds about understanding global warming, how do we live in a green, responsible way. And so I think we need to be sort of flushing all of this out, and I think we don't have enough time really to do it in the time that you've got facing you, but I think it's really worthwhile that we try and do that here, because we are only going to have one stab at it, and I think this is the stab.
Thank you. There was one back in the back row back there. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Kathy Slater, Area B. I first want to make a comment on Sheila's statement about freezing development until this regional growth strategy is complete. I was, within the past month, I was in a public situation where a planner was saying there's a gold rush of development happening right now, almost more than they can handle in the department. And he wished that the elected reps would get some political guts to say no to development. He said, they've got the power, they can do it, and for some reason they think they can't, or something like that. Just wish that they would develop the political guts. I'm a director on the COMOX Valley Environmental Council. We are delighted that this strategy is underway. We're really excited about it. We endorsed the Regional Growth Planning Strategy about a year ago in Part 25 of the Local Government Act, and sent that letter out to all the elected governments. We really want to see the sprawl stopped that's interfering with the wilderness, integrity of the wilderness habitat, amongst other things. What else did I want to say? To citizen engagement, I attended the World Urban Forum in 2006, and a statement out of that forum was that citizen-driven planning is the best form of planning. It's better than government-driven planning, planning department-driven planning, developer-driven planning. And why? Because citizens know their neighborhoods and their region the best, and citizens have a vested interest in the long-term livability of their community. They want to see it economically strong, they want to see it environmentally healthy, they want to see it socially and culturally vital. And so to miss an opportunity to survey, this evening was an example. Look at the ideas that came out of this room tonight. It's important to engage the citizens right from the beginning, education forums, information in the papers, surveys. I'd like to see citizens and NGOs involved with government and planning departments and experts that are brought in from other areas in design charrettes in each of the areas of a vital community: transportation, housing, education, public health, because we will need to have buy-in by the citizens into the regional growth strategy, and it will take all of us working together, not just government or in business or planning departments. It'll take NGOs and citizens working together in each of these areas to make these all work. We're working in the community. So, and on that note, CVEC, the COMOX Valley Environmental Council, approached Smart Growth BC, and they have taken us on for a CAP project to help activate citizens in our area. Are you aware of that? I'll just let you know that. We were accepted a year ago. We're one of the communities in BC, all of BC. Also, I approached the Canadian Climate Impact and Adaptation Resource Network at UBC. They, a year and a half ago, said they were willing to work with us to be involved in designing a climate change sustainable plan here. So I just pass that on.
Great. Thank you. Yes, sir.
My name is Benjamin Dunson. I just want to ask Brett, from your experience working with these other communities, were there any members involved that disagreed with the process and held you up, and then what kind of avenues do you go about to continue the process? Now, if the process is held up, do you give them what they want just to appease the process, or does the process change according to their needs and desires, and how do you arrange that to happen?
Well, I guess you can explain it in terms of two ways. There's an informal consultation process, and then there's formal, in the sense that this, the regional district, the growth strategy is brought to life through being a regional district bylaw. So informal consultation, like when I talk about that, what I mean is the public input, the interagency advisory input, all the discussion that's out there that basically the RD then has to sauce down into the bylaw. And so what the regional district is required to do is to develop a consultation plan and adopt it. So by resolution they have to say, okay, this is how we're going to undertake getting input on the RGS, and then they have to implement that. The province doesn't necessarily say, we don't have a regulation that tells them exactly how to conduct that consultation. We don't police that consultation. That's going to very much be part of the local debate here. And we're already hearing it tonight. I think the regional district and municipal politicians are getting some signals from the public around what kind of consultation they want to see here. The formal acceptance process that I talked about is when the member municipalities and adjacent regional districts have to look at the bylaw and accept it or not. And under the legislation, if they refuse to accept it when it's in that form, they have to say why. And then it's not just a simple matter of those things then get dealt with according to how that municipality or Strathcona Regional District, in terms of what they dictate. No, there's dispute resolution. That starts with informal non-binding process, interest-based discussion, and then can move to arbitration. But it's not simply a matter of, okay, one municipality or one adjacent regional district objects, and they get their way. That's not what it's about. It's about interest-based discussion and trying to find a consensual resolution. There is provision in legislation for sort of a agree to disagree. So you can have a situation where a certain aspect of the RGS may not necessarily apply to one particular community. So right now in Squamish and Lillooet, I mentioned earlier that they've done first and second reading of their bylaw. They're then going to hold a public hearing, and then it goes up to the member municipalities. We, based on what we've heard from council and locally, the district of Lillooet, which is really a different part of the region, it's more closely connected to more Caribou in the interior, doesn't have the same growth pressure. They may not necessarily want aspects of the RGS to apply. They may choose not to accept it, and then we'll be in dispute resolution.
As we're not old the process, it's still...
It's part of the process.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brent. Yes, ma'am. Sorry, Kate, there's still people who haven't spoken for the first time. I'm really trying to respect the fact that we're trying to get as many people as possible, so hope you bear with us.
Leanne Vaughn, Area C. I would like to address the consultation process itself and suggest that you make it as inviting as possible to all ages of people. I think it was Mr. Bradley that presented the concept of school children. This is an incredibly important issue, and it's going to continue on for a huge number of years. So part of the consultation process, I would like to see it have built into it at the level of the grassroots level here, where it is a continuation, where this grassroots is continued to carry on forward. I would like to see an incredible amount of information pouring out of your office to the general public through whichever and all means possible, through the flyers I think were presented. The information coming out of this meeting is very important. There's been all kinds of issues brought up, you know, the biodiversity, containment, the moratorium, environmental infrastructure, demographics, it goes on. And the more people that are aware of the types of issues that are being presented in meetings like this, the more we're going to get the type of input that's going to create the kind of plan that we're all going to be able to live with at some level. Education, educate me, educate us, educate the people that are younger, educate the people that don't know very much about this, make the information easy for them to absorb. I think that's very important.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I'd just like to...
Name?
Wayne White, I'm Courtney, City Courtney.
Thanks.
I'd just like to make a little bit of a point about the process. I'm just wondering, just for people's interest, that is there an official reporter here tonight, or are you just each taking your own notes? And how important is it for us to get those sheets into you if we want to make sure that our points are put forward?
Thank
I
you.
guess the second point I guess I'd like to make to Brent is for the local context. Is our regional district has really been carved down to about the size of the district municipality. And really most of the power lies at the regional district level now. The Ministry of Forest really has no say on private logging lands. The so really they're not involved. The number of parcels of Crown land have been essentially put on the treaty table. They're really not available for any kind of planning at all at the moment. So there's really a lot of those provincial issues that really don't apply in this regional district. So you're going to have to kind of wrap your head around that there's probably going to be some different set of actors that you're going to have to involve. Those big land use ministries you talk in provincial terms don't really have a local context.
Okay, thanks for that. And okay, yeah, quickly.
Well, we can talk after.
Okay, thank you for the reminder about the comment sheet. So first off, we've been taking notes of key issues raised tonight, and in some form or fashion, I hope that over the course of this, we actually have a place on our website where we can post the record of meetings so people can actually see that we maybe heard or correct us if we've got something wrong. We also put at the back of the table there some comment sheets, and for overkill, write something down, even if you said it, to make sure that we captured exactly the way you wanted us to hear it. You can leave those with us tonight. You can take them down to the regional district office, and we're going to be setting up an email system so that people can just send in comments that way. Okay, thank you.
Maybe have it set up so that they can drop them off at their municipal halls?
Oh yeah, certainly. I think that that goes without saying that the parties will, at the City of Courtenay, Village of Cumberland, and Town of Comox, they would accept input as well. So thank you very much for reminding me of that. Is there anybody else who hasn't spoken yet? Okay, go ahead.
As a citizen journalist, I'm here to document the proceedings. My assumption is that I have everyone's permission to post what I've recorded here on the internet so that it's widely available. If there's anyone here who doesn't want to be shown, doesn't want to be represented, please let me know, and I'll do my best to edit that out. Otherwise, this will be available on Google Video within the next week or two. And
thank you.
Thank you.
So, if anyone feels worried about being seen, I don't know.
They already left.
They already left. Okay, nobody else speaking for the first time, because now we're going to start going back around again. So you've been very patient second time. And when we have about 5 minutes left, so I'd ask you to be
brief. If I stand on one leg and when I fall over, I'll stop.
Okay.
Apropos of the last remark, I've said some rather terrible things about local people in recent years. I'm waiting patiently for a charge of slander, but it's yet to come. Now, the three things which I feel should be addressed particularly: housing, First Nations, and services. Housing, the good lady there remarked upon the neglect, or so she saw, or emphasis should be placed upon children and youth. It's a fact that here in the valley, our schools have been in serious decline. Across the province, we have a 70,000 or more decline in school population, 100 or more schools closed, 6 here in Campbell River and Courtenay. Quite apart from that, there's the offset. We're catering largely to retirees. Now, when it comes to housing, again, we've got that express train has already collided down south of the border, you know, the mortgage meltdown. We have a similar train heading for a collision here. That's the 40-year mortgage business, 2 paychecks to get a mortgage. I think our planners and so on have to pay heed to this kind of thing. Services, police. Where I live in Area C at Merville, forget it, they're half an hour away. These are things which should be addressed particularly in a planning process. Fire, forget it. 3 serious fires in recent months, all write-offs. Water and sewers, none. Schools, well, I've remarked upon those. Health, as I say, half an hour away. We have to consider these things particularly. First Nation, somebody remarked upon Timber West. Do people here realise that they own 9% of Vancouver Island, 330,000 hectares? And that's not counting Western Forest Products and Canfor, so presumably we'll have to ask them nicely before we can do anything. I thought that forest licenses and so on were for Crown land, but they're not. These people own the land, all of it. First Nations. Now, across the road from me, just across the road, the native people are claiming 500 hectares. That's 2 square miles. And when I ask about Matla, people don't want to talk about it. They say, oh, it hasn't affected market value and it hasn't come up yet. But I did dig into this deeply with the feds. No one else would talk about it, the local people. Down at the McKellarney, I'm mentioning that name, McKellarney, have said that they can accommodate 16,000 native people at Merville. 16,000. I remarked that there weren't enough native people to go round. Apparently they want it for commerce and industry. Now the native people are not answerable to the local government, they're answerable to the Ministry of Lands and Forests. So anything goes there, presumably. Now these are points to ponder on which I shall be presenting in writing to the people concerned, and I do hope that due heed will be paid. The very last thing I have to say is that, you know, marrying in haste and repenting at leisure, we have a little subdivision out at Merville, 35 houses. That went in years ago. The speculators speculated, and the developers developed, and the realtors realised, and then they left. The local people now are sort of picking up the pieces. Water supply is inadequate, fire hydrants don't work, the roads have collapsed, they're under constant repair, and you never guess who's paying.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I have 2 things. One, I mentioned earlier to include improvement district. The second thing is to hold local meetings. It's cheaper and less impact on the environment for 6 people to drive to a community center that all the landowners can come to, rather than all the landowners coming in here to your place.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Respecting the fact that we said 9 o'clock, we're going to keep you here that long. I think that our agreement is now near at end, and I turn it over to Chair Bates for final comments.
Well, thank you all for the generous input, and I think it's very important, and it is being heard, and it is being recorded. Obviously, you're well aware not every concern would be met in the final process. I've never seen a politician that could accomplish that. And, you know, the concerns about change, I think it's important to put it in perspective that without change, we wouldn't have some of the positive things we have today with regards to protecting the environment, with regards to some of the ways we try and have input. So there does have to be change. It's probably the most constant thing in our lives. We have to reflect the values of the times and how they go. But absolutely, your comments are heard. Absolutely. I can assure you there will be full participation in public consultation. And I like the idea of moving it around to the various communities and areas. And I don't see why that can't be accomplished. We're certainly not at a point where we can tell you there's decisions made. I can assure you, in fact, there has been no decision, there is no policy or mandate that will come after the process. So again, thanks for coming out and enjoy your evening.